Chad's so grateful that Julie figured out they were in the elevator, and she, in turn, snarks about being stuck in there with Kat. The whole incident was odd. You know what else is odd? Where'd Felicity go? Marlena pulls Julie off to the side to suggest she pull back on the cat bashing. The person, not the animal, but that shouldn't happen either. Chad apologizes for Julie, and we find out that Felicity left, so that answers that question. Kat has her own question. What was Chad about to say in the elevator? Nothing important, he mutters. Julie wanders back over and makes Kat uncomfortable enough to leave. Her cattiness finally annoys Chad enough to tell her to knock it off. He won't change her mind about Kat, and Julie won't do the same with him. He's a grown-up, so keep her thoughts to herself from now on. It's stern enough that Julie starts crying and apologizes, saying Chad means the world to her, and spending time with his kids is her favorite thing now, especially going to Foster's bookstore. Actually, does Chad want to buy it? Daddy could buy the kids' favorite store. Chad points out that the book market keeps shrinking, and Julie makes an impassioned speech about teaching kids the joy of reading and keeping books and reading alive for generations to come. Beautiful, Chad says. She should buy the store. And there we have it. Julie comes up with a bunch of excuses why she shouldn't, but Chad points out how bored she always says she is, then leaves her to stew over the idea. Marlena brings Sarah some coffee to apologize for being late, what with the elevator rescue. Sarah jumps right on blaming EJ for not taking care of the elevator when she called. But moving on to test results for Marlena, they're all negative. Nothing's wrong. Except Susan's premonition, Marlena thinks. She tells Sarah she found a therapist, and she had a very helpful conversation with Sammy. Marlena deftly pivots to Sarah and Xander, which works for a time, until Sarah finishes explaining the situation and then returns to her determination to find an answer for Marlena. Sarah reminds Marlena of both her dads, Neil and Mickey, and that starts the waterworks, since Sarah's still emotionally raw from the separation. But moving on, she still has some theories on Marlena, insisting they'll figure it out together. Marlena thanks her and leaves. Johnny finds Susan watching a lecture from MIT in the living room. EJ joins them just as Susan's rolling her eyes at hearing that Sammy is in town. It doesn't help that Johnny tells them that Sammy's not going to be in court, since yesterday was her only day here. Johnny defends his mom to Susan, then EJ jumps in, but Susan lays into Sammy like a dog with a bone, or Julie with Kat. She acknowledges Sammy had good parents at least, but then bursts out with, "Dr. Marlena Evans has gone back to the dark side." And time for the grown-ups to talk. EJ sends Johnny off for some trial documents, then demands an explanation. "The vibes aren't vibing with Marlena," Susan tells her son. His response? "The woman is in mourning." EJ snaps at her to use her powers to find his shooter, but she's not any more successful than he was with hypnosis. Susan leaves and Johnny comes back down, saying the whole thing reminded him of his own possession era. Honestly, that would traumatize anyone. Gabi helps herself to Rafe's freshly poured coffee to get ready for her meeting with Xander. Rafe has his own meeting, but he does some verbal gymnastics to avoid giving Gabi any answers about what he's doing or who he's working with without lying. Sarah, meanwhile, is having a sexy, sweet dream about Xander. Wait, it's actually Xander having the dream, apparently seriously missing Sarah. But life goes on, and he heads into work, with Gabi rushing into his office sometime later. Also, the office is back down to one desk. They must have an employee just to move desks in and out of there. Xander asks how Ari is, and Gabi seems genuinely appreciative, but not enough to stop her from playing him. She asks him out to lunch, which makes Xander immediately suspicious. Once Gabi hears he and Sarah separated, she uses that to push for a meal to cheer him up. Xander agrees to dinner. But then he gets an upsetting call. Gabi locks right in, asking what's happening the second he hangs up. Someone filed a FOIA request on the takeover of Demera. Gabi doesn't know why that would be a problem, but Xander's super uncomfortable at the thought and tells her to see herself out. We smell a scandal. Kat greets Rafe at his office, blaming the elevator for being late. They then begin to fight, because he's training her, not because he's angry. But then Rafe turns into Chad, and the sparring gets super sexy. Hyper-realistic daydreaming is probably not a good survival technique when fighting for your life. Somehow, though, she snaps back to reality. Still impresses Rafe, Susan runs into Marlena in the square and apologizes for saying those awful things about her. But then Susan gets woozy and declares that she knows what's wrong with Marlena. Which is... vampires? No. Aliens? Something about blood draining, which, understandably, makes Marlena want to run. Susan can't figure out what she means, though. Sarah and Xander have an awkward run-in outside the pub, and it gets more awkward when Xander tells Sarah he saw her hugging Brady. One person can just be nice to another person without there being sex involved. Sarah snaps at him to get over himself and walks away. Xander looks sad. EJ reassures Johnny that his fury towards him wasn't the same as the devil putting him in a red suit and pulling the strings. EJ takes the opening to tell Johnny that, while he's good, his dad hasn't always been, and that ruthlessness is needed again to protect him. Johnny's a bit unsure, but they both love each other, so why not? The trial of Days of Our Lives, Johnny DiMera, is heating up, but since guilty parties rarely go on trial on soaps, it's a pretty good bet that Johnny did not shoot EJ. But if it wasn't Johnny, who really pulled that trigger that fateful night? It was clear from the start that EJ recognized his shooter, as he didn't even seem surprised to see them when he looked up and spotted someone with a gun. In fact, he seemed more exasperated than scared. While most people would express fear when a gun was pointed at them, EJ didn't take the shooter seriously at all. In fact, he was more annoyed than anything else and asked the shooter what they were doing before a bullet landed in his chest. Since EJ woke from his coma, he has been trying to remember who he saw, but to no avail. Even hypnosis hasn't done the trick. Whenever EJ remembers that night, he indeed looks scared when he looks up. We now know that's because Johnny was waving a gun around earlier, so EJ was nearly shot before being really shot. But why would EJ seem not to take the real shooter seriously? A few weeks before EJ was shot, Kristen warned her mother not to have a gun in the house since young Rachel lived there. Rachel has also been more disturbed about what she saw that night than the other DiMeras. She witnessed Johnny and EJ arguing over a gun, which meant she knew a gun was nearby. Is it possible that Rachel picked the gun out of the planter that night and waved it around her uncle, accidentally shooting EJ? It would explain why EJ didn't seem too concerned when he saw the shooter. He probably thought Rachel had a toy gun, and if she didn't, he certainly didn't expect a child to pull the trigger. It would explain why Rachel is still so frightened about testifying and why EJ is blocking the memory. It is horrifying for an adult to think about a child shooting a gun, and equally as horrifying to be a child who accidentally shoots someone. Will the truth come out on the witness stand, or will it remain buried in the annals of Days of Our Lives and DiMera history forever? Days of Our Lives spoilers for Thursday, August 7th reveal that Alex Kyriakis may offer some arrest answers while EJ DiMera betrays Belle Black. Johnny DiMera will also take the stand, so there'll be much more drama to come in Salem. For starters, EJ will sneak off to Belle's room at the Salem Inn, where they'll steal some sizzling moments before it's time to head back to court. Things will be going well between Belle and EJ behind closed doors, but Days spoilers say the situation will soon take a troubling turn. There's been some talk about how Belle could get disbarred if it seems like she's not prosecuting this case to the best of her abilities. That's why it'll feel like a huge betrayal when EJ makes a big deal about her conflict of interest and calls for a mistrial. Of course, EJ won't get his wish, but he'll prove he wasn't kidding when he told Johnny that he'd have to play dirtier and get far more ruthless. As for Johnny, he'll spill his fears to Chanel Dupree DiMera. Johnny may worry about how low EJ will have to sink, and even then, he'll know there aren't any guarantees his father can keep him out of prison. Days spoilers say Chanel will give Johnny the support he needs, so he'll try to stay strong as he ultimately takes the stand. There'll be some tricky questions for Johnny, but he'll tell the truth about his innocence and hope for the best. As for Gabi Hernandez, she'll confide in Xander Kyriakis now that she's wrapped up her own testimony in court. Days spoilers say Gabi will connect with Xander ahead of their dinner together, so she'll be pleased over pulling him closer. It could make it easier for Gabi to score Titan dirt if she plays her cards right. Meanwhile, Steve Johnson will put Alex through a grilling session. It seems likely Steve will seek updates on Alex's arrest before he returned to Salem, so Alex may come clean about his crimes and what really went down. Next, on Thursday's DOOL episode, Anna DiMera will tell Tony DiMera about Susan Banks spreading the news that Stefano DiMera is alive. Although Tony will laugh it off, he might be keeping some secrets when it comes to Stefano, and the possibility that he's risen from the grave. Days of Our Lives spoilers say Tony will continue to focus on the DiMera family and what's best for the people he cares about, so stay tuned. Here are your Days of Our Lives spoilers for Wednesday, August 6th, 2025. Sophia does her best to get back into life and pretend that things are normal, but that's easier said than done. Melinda tries to convince her new young friend that everything is going to be all right if they just stick to their plan. Does Sophia tell Melinda that she's already veered from that plan and told Sarah everything? Sarah had already figured out that something was up because she knew that Sophia had given birth to a boy and not a girl. Sarah is bound by HIPAA laws, but it's still dangerous to have someone else know the truth. Sophia also has to deal with Tate's questions. He wants to believe everything Sophia has told him, but there's something that still doesn't sit right about her story. When Tate and Sophia meet at the Brady pub, will he notice just how nervous Sophia seems? She snaps at home when he asks too many questions, which isn't like Sophia. Will Tate chalk it up to her postpartum nerves, or will he start digging for the truth about what really happened to his newborn child? Now that EJ has told Johnny he has to truly play dirty if he is to get Johnny acquitted, Johnny braces himself to learn what his father is really up to. EJ claims that he's still turned over a new leaf, but even good guys have to be bad guys sometimes for the greater good, or at least what they believe is the greater good. For EJ, the greater good is making sure his son does not wind up behind bars for the rest of his life. Johnny listens as EJ tells his son his plan. He doesn't like what EJ has planned, but EJ begs Johnny to just trust the process. Is EJ about to throw Belle under the bus? Belle wants Johnny to get off as much as EJ does, but she would rather not have her career ruined thanks to EJ's machinations. Days of Our Lives. Spoilers for Wednesday, August 6th, imply some major bombshells on the horizon in Salem. Two characters have a strategy session, while another complains about their situation, and someone is quick on their feet. What's set to go down on Wednesday? Time to find out. Days of Our Lives spoilers for Wednesday, August 6th, imply that EJ DiMera and Johnny DiMera will have a strategy session about Johnny's current legal battle. Can the two come up with a way to exonerate the young man? Here's hoping they can. Meanwhile, Johnny's mother-in-law, Paulina Price, will be completely stressed out over her family's predicament, and thankfully, Abe Carver will be on hand to provide some reassurance. Across town, Gabi Hernandez will have a vent session with none other than Rafe Hernandez and Leo Stark. She's dealing with a lot of Gabi chic now that Titan has taken over DiMera. But will she complain about work? Or is this more about Ariana Ari Horton? Her 18-year-old daughter got kidnapped recently. And Gabi has always been overly protective. Ari isn't a child, but she'll always be Gabi's baby, so the mom may vent her concerns about her daughter. With that said, will Leo and Rafe have good advice to offer? Lastly, Days of Our Lives. Spoilers for Wednesday say that Sophia Choi will have to think quickly on her feet when Tate Black starts asking for information. This is likely about their baby's adoption, as things aren't sitting right for Tate. And he's not wrong to feel as if something is off. After all, Sophia has lied about when she gave birth, where their baby went, and even the child's gender. The only person who knows about Sophia's lie is Sarah Horton Kyriakis, but she's bound by patient confidentiality, so it sounds like this storyline is about to get stickier by the moment. Are you pumped about Wednesday's show? Comment below. Is it connected to EJ and Belle? Days of Our Lives spoilers for Thursday, August 7th put Anna and Tony at the center of a mystery about the late Stefano DiMera. Ever since Susan shrieked about feeling Stefano's presence in the DiMera mansion, EJ has been a tiny bit curious about his father's status, as in dead or alive. Now Anna has something to say about her father-in-law, something Tony may not be excited to hear. while Johnny continues to worry about the minor detail of whether he will be found guilty of trying to murder his father, said father, EJ, puts his own concerns on hold to meet with opposing counsel, Bell. Sure. He wants to discuss his son's case, totally. But if something more were to develop, and that something more had better not be a discussion of what they will do now that her sister and his ex-wife, Sammy, Osis Vaiki, is back in Salem. Steve confided in Kayla that, while investigating the Kyriakis family in general, he found out something about Alex in particular, and it wasn't good. Now Steve worries about what this means for Alex's relationship with Stephanie. And unlike most people who worry without doing anything about it, Steve takes his questions straight to the source and confronts his little girl's current fling. Gabi and Xander have been awfully chummy lately, haven't they? She helped him with Victoria, and he offered her support when Ari went missing. Well, now it's time for another heart-to-heart between them. Just how close are these former foes going to get? The comical moments we didn't know we needed. For daytime dramas, Days of Our Lives and General Hospital were full of comedy last week, thanks to two iconic returns. But which feisty female won their comedic takes? No way that Susan has returned to Salem. She's back on a mission. As a medium in training, she wants to prove her grandson's innocence while discovering Stefani's presence in the DeMera mansion. Hajduk turned the July 31st episode into comedy gold when she let Susan loose throughout the mansion. As EJ and Chad discussed Johnny's trial, Susan could be seen in the background hovering across the couch and scouring the lamp for any vibe that Stefano was there. I can't believe that we've gone this many years without seeing Chad interact with Susan until now. Those scenes were funny. He couldn't take his eyes off of her and her antics, one fan shared on X, while another recapped Susan being weird around the living room. Over on the July 29th episode of GH, Obrecht has been nothing but snarky since her recent return to Port Charles. But it was her tipsy conversation with Jason that had us LOLing. When Jason found her drinking after Willow and Drew's wedding that wasn't, she began imitating a wide-eyed Willow with, "Did you sleep with my mutter?" before cracking herself up. Obrecht is hilarious about what happened at the wedding, one viewer noted, while another admitted, Obrecht is entertaining, but will always be a villain to me. Judging by the buzz Susan and Obrecht both gained on social media for their comical moments, these two may have tied for bringing a little comedy to daytime last week. Days of Our Lives spoilers reveal that Alex Kyriakis is arrested for some mysterious crimes in the past. What did Alex do that Justin Kyriakis refers to as being young and stupid? Will Alex be arrested again because of them? Steve Johnson spilled to Kayla Johnson last week that while digging up some dirt on the Kyriakis family, Steve discovered an arrest of Alex before he returned to Salem. Steve wasn't absolutely sure about what the charges were, just that Alex had committed a couple of crimes. What exactly did Alex do? Justin wouldn't give Steve any information on what exactly Alex did. However, it was enough to worry Steve considering Alex is with Stephanie Johnson, his daughter, and she had an abusive boyfriend before. Steve is worried that Alex could do that same. Could Alex turn violent towards Stephanie? Steve and Kayla discuss whether or not they should tell Stephanie. Steve has chosen to keep quiet about what happened in Alex's past and just keep an eye on him. Steve may not tell Stephanie what he knows, but Stephanie may get some information about Alex's legal problems in the future, whether Steve tells her or not. Stephanie may be very upset with Alex and her dad for not telling her the truth. Alex had promised not to lie to her anymore. Does not bringing up old charges count as lying? Steve could have told her as well, and if Alex did something violent, why would he not tell her anything? Didn't her dad think she had a right to know? Spoilers reveal that Alex may face an interrogation from Stephanie about what happened before he came back to Salem. Alex may have Stephanie a little unsettled. Stephanie may just not understand why Alex didn't tell her. Or all of this. Why did Alex want Stephanie to know what happened back then? Will Stephanie forgive Alex? According to spoilers, Stephanie will buy that explanation if Alex explains that whole story. All of this is obviously leading up to the return of Jeremy Horton at some point. All of this will certainly remind Stephanie of the abuse she suffered years ago. Alex will certainly be in the hot seat once Stephanie learns this information. Dark side vibes hit Marlena, Souza, Xander, Gabi, EJ, and Julie. The dark side was kind of a theme in the Tuesday, August 5th episode of Days of Our Lives. Marlena couldn't shake those dark side vibes despite Sarah telling her she was physically healthy. EJ warned Johnny that he would have to go dark side to save him. Julie didn't cut Kat any slack after her night in an elevator with Chad. Gabi is getting sneaky to achieve her goal of becoming Dimera CEO once again. Xander jealously confronted Sarah about her hug with Brady. And Susan was the mean one when she couldn't stop insulting Sammy in front of Johnny and EJ. Something is wrong with Marlena, and it isn't her body. Once again, the test results came back, and Sarah couldn't pinpoint anything wrong with the psychiatrist from a physical point of view. She wants to check if other things are going on, like chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. Later in Tuesday's episode, Marlena ran into Susan in the square. And again, the medium in training felt those vibes that could signal something was wrong with Marlena's soul. Susan wouldn't leave Marlena alone, even though the doctor clearly didn't feel comfortable with any of this. Susan knows no boundaries. Speaking of which, earlier at the Dimera mansion, Susan railed at Johnny and EJ about a visiting Sammy. She will be supporting Johnny from afar, which triggered Susan to go off on a Sammy rant about how she was obsessed with EJ. After Susan subsequently went off on a Marlena rant, it was clear she had upset Johnny. He didn't want to hear what Susan had to say about his mom, and especially not his grandmom. Perhaps EJ laid the foundation for his eventual argument about throwing Chanel under the bus. Today, EJ told his son that even though when he woke up from his coma, he felt like a new man, EJ 2.0, he will have to revert to type for the remainder of the trial. EJ told Johnny that he would have to be more ruthless than he already has been. What does that mean? And who is EJ about to mow down in order to get his son exonerated? Julie despises Kat with good reason and has every right to hold on to that hate. But what doesn't help anyone is the consistent unleashing of her opinions when she knows Chad doesn't feel the same way. And that's basically what Chad had to tell her. Julie understood and realized that sometimes she could go too far. But at least she's thinking about buying Foster's bookstore. That's something that would put her nowhere near the dark side. It became clear that Gabi wouldn't let her and Xander's recent friendly vibes ruin what she really wanted, to be the Dimera CEO once again. She definitely seemed flirty with Xander in their meeting to discuss Gabi Schick's successes. She asked him out to lunch to celebrate and thank him for being so kind during the Ari kidnapping crisis. Instead, they made dinner plans. Gabi got on the phone with Tony and told him that at this dinner, she would find out what they needed to know to get Dimera back in Dimera hands. When Xander and Sarah ran into each other in front of the Brady pub, they attempted to have a civil conversation. They really did. Earlier, Xander had a dream that he was still with Sarah. Unfortunately, the conversation veered when he brought up witnessing Sarah in Brady's arms. Sarah tried to tell him the hug was friendship vibes only, but Xander didn't want to hear it. He talked about letting the ink dry on their separation papers before moving on to his nephew. But of course, he didn't tell Sarah that he had already slept with Gwen. This show keeps digging in deeper on keeping Xander and Sarah apart.